Ms. Bishop, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
I want to begin, if you will, on your assessment of this leadership forum. Founded back in 2010, you became Australia's Minister for Foreign Affairs not long afterwards. What do you think the value of this summit has been for the Canada-Australia relationship?
Australia and Canada are very long-standing, close friends. We often have the same worldview. We often see issues through the same perspective. But I think it's important for us to continue to exchange ideas and experiences. We have very similar economies, but that doesn't mean that there's not more that we can do, for example, in two-way trade and investment. But it's our approach to global challenges that I think brings us together, and the importance of, for example, both Australia and Canada promoting and advocating for a more open global economy. There are many issues where together we're stronger than just one voice.
Mm-hmm. I do want to break down those issues a bit, but let's begin with trade, because you referenced trade a couple of times in your first answer. When we look at the numbers in terms of Canada's trading partners, Australia is not even the top 10. I appreciate that it has increased, but here we are, a vast ocean separating our two countries. How can that trade increase or that relationship strengthen given the physical geographic challenge that we face?
Well, the United States is one of our significant trading partners, and they are a similar geographic distance. We are both mining and resource and agriculture commodities exporters. So in that sense, we're competitors. Our economies almost mirror each other. But I believe that as like-minded nations sharing similar values and sharing similar historic experiences, there is more we can do together. And that includes increasing investment. And we've seen some interest of Australian companies in Canadian companies and vice versa. So I think there's more that we can do to make investment in each other's countries more comfortable, easy. But in terms of trade, there are many other things beyond commodities. I would love to see more educational exchange, more tourist exchange, financial services. There's more that we can do. And I know we've had trade agreements over the years. I think the earliest trade agreement between Australia and Canada was back in the 1930s. I think we could update that and have a contemporary free trade agreement, even though we are both members of the what do they call it now? CCTPP?
Yeah.
It used to be the TPP, however the acronym is now.
We get the gist.
Yeah, you know the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I do believe that there's a risk of that being almost lowest common denominator, and there's more that can happen bilaterally. So I would encourage the legislators in both Canada and Australia to consider what a contemporary 21st century free trade agreement between our two nations could look like and what we could encompass. I also think the ease of travel for young Australians and young Canadians would be a really good idea.
Mm-hmm. I do want to touch a little bit though, if we're going to increase this relationship, increase trade, we're also right now at the very least facing this moment where not only the Central Bank of Canada but also that of Australia, both are raising interest rates right now, trying to curtail inflation. How do you talk about increasing trade in an environment where both our central banks are trying to quell economic growth, if you will?
Except that we are both open, export-oriented market economies that rely on free access to markets around the world. Australia's economic growth is based on its ability to send its goods and services around the world. Same with Canada. We have a significant relationship with China. That's our largest two-way trading partner. The US is our largest foreign investment partner. But there is, of course, more that we can do. Just because we are going through a challenging time in terms of interest rate rises doesn't mean that we shouldn't be looking for more opportunities to trade because the economy is cyclical.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned China, as you say, Australia's largest trading partner, but here we are in this country dealing with the issue of foreign interference. It is certainly, when it comes to China, an issue that Australia also took on. Are there any lessons for Canada as we look at this issue that we might take from Australia's experience?
Well, I would be loath to give Canada any lessons. We often look to Canada for ideas and suggestions and experiences. And I think we have much to learn from each other. We always have and we always will. Both Australia and Canada have been subjected to the infamous Chinese blowtorch and deep freeze, diplomatically speaking, and we've both dealt with that over time. I think what's important is for us to share those experiences and learn from each other. Perhaps there's a role that we can both play in moderating tensions between the United States and China. So there is much that we can do, both individually and collectively. Australia is in somewhat of a different position. As you say, China is our largest two-way trading partner. We are one of the few nations that has a massive trade surplus with China. So perhaps we have to take different issues into account, but we can certainly share our experiences with Canada.
Are there any pitfalls, though, that we should bear in mind? Because we are, right now, as I say, watching at a distance, we know that Australia took it on the chin from China when it started to crack down on interference and the way Australia is being dealt with. Are there any lessons that we might learn from?
Well, economic coercion does have an impact. We say Australia took it on the chin. It hurt our exporters, particularly in wine, barley, some other agricultural exports. And our exporters had to find other markets. I guess the lesson is to diversify. Don't have all your eggs in one basket, as they say. And so, for example, our wine industry, which had been sending billions of dollars of wine to China, suddenly their wine was sitting on a wharf somewhere. So they learned to diversify. But that's a fundamental lesson, I think, in trading anyway, to diversify your markets, and our exporters have certainly done that.
Mm-hmm. I also wanted to talk about AUKUS, if you will, the security pact that Australia has signed with the United States and the United Kingdom. At the base of it are nuclear submarines, but there are many Canadians who are upset not so much at Australia but at our own government for not being a part of that security agreement. What would you say to them?
I think it was a matter of circumstances that Australia was changing its policy in terms of submarines. When I was in Cabinet, there was no option presented to us for nuclear propelled submarines. It was a question of diesel subs or not at all. And so suddenly this opportunity apparently arose for Australia to have access to nuclear propelled submarines, which was a better fit for what we were seeking to do. And so the United States and the United Kingdom presented this opportunity. I suspect that it was focused very much from the Australian side of things. And so while Canadians might be upset with the US and the UK, I think it was driven by Australia's need for another level of submarine capability. Having said that, the idea of Canada being part of AUKUS at some point put the submarine to one side, put the whole submarine project to one side. There will be other exchanges of intelligence, security, intellectual property, and Canada is a natural partner for AUKUS. So, stage 2.